What up, family? It is Jaquie Rogers, and I am checking in for the fourth day number 4 of our Mama to Mama workshop series, where we're tackling the topic of special education and how to secure the resources that you need for your child in order for them to be successful in K through 12 schools and beyond. And so this week we're talking about special education. And on Monday, we started off talking about IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which is the legislation that governs how funding and processes for securing special education are supposed to go. We talked about interventions, so steps you can take prior to seeking out those services for your children. And then on Tuesday, we talked about the 13 conditions that are covered by IDEA. On Wednesday, we talked about the differences between IEPs and 504 plans. So once you start taking steps to secure special education resources for your child, it's important to know the types of plans those resources can fall under. And today, we're actually going to talk about the evaluation process. And so if you started embarking on the journey to securing those resources for your child, and you're curious to know what the evaluation process looks like, the steps you'll have to take, the options that are available to you, the process before, during, after, what it looks like if you're in a private school versus a public school, disputing if things don't go the way you feel they should. We're going to talk about all of that today. So first, we're going to give a brief overview of evaluations. So when the school, doctors, or others talk about your child getting tested, what does that mean? Typically, they're referring to an evaluation. An evaluation is often the first step towards getting your child help at school, and many people might refer to it as an education evaluation, a school evaluation, or an educational assessment. And it can lead to your child receiving special education services and support. Whether the school or your child's doctor suggests an evaluation, or even you, because you might notice that something is going on. However, it is important that it is affirmed by the school or your child's doctor that an evaluation should happen. It's important to know the basics before you consider having your child tested. And this knowledge can help you feel more at ease in what may be uncharted territory. So if you're new to evaluations, you may have a lot of questions. One thing that can make learning about evaluation so confusing is that there's so many different terms for them. And so it's really cool. I posted this on my website, understood.org, which has been a huge resource in me collecting and gathering a lot of the information that I'm sharing with you. They published a really cool chart that reviews terms that you might hear. So I'll include that in the support materials that I make available on tomorrow. And so this evaluation can lead to your child receiving help through an IEP, individualized education program, or a 504 plan. And so you might be curious about whether evaluations for IEPs and 504 plans are different. And so in yesterday's videos, I reviewed these differences and went in depth about each one. And so if you go back and watch those videos and you still have questions after viewing, please don't hesitate to reach out. And so some of us may have also heard of functional assessments in schools. And so there is a difference between an evaluation and a functional assessment. An evaluation looks for issues that might make a child eligible for special education services. A functional assessment looks at problems with behavior. And so it might be done as a part of an evaluation, but it is not the same thing. I've also created a separate video on how functional assessments work. And so if that's something that interests you, go check it out. So what about the age range for kids who can be evaluated? If your child is in preschool, you may think they have to wait until they start school to get an evaluation, but children from birth through age 3 can be evaluated to find out if they're eligible for what are called early intervention services. And so I've made a video detailing those a little more. And I'll also include a year-by-year guide on early intervention services, also provided by understood.org, in the resources folder that'll be made available on tomorrow as well. And so I'd also like to briefly talk about private versus school evaluations, and this is also something that I'll go into more in depth in a separate video. But when it comes to having your child evaluated, there are two basic options: a free evaluation by the school district or a private evaluation that you pay for. This is true whether your child attends public school or private school or is homeschooled. And getting one doesn't mean you can't get the other. And so I also, in that other video, compare the pros and cons of each. And so you may have also heard about what are called independent educational evaluations, or IEEs. These are private evaluations that are done by an outside professional, but they're paid for by the school. And guess what? I created a video about that too. So lastly, I briefly want to touch on, and I'll go more in depth about this later, our evaluations for college testing accommodations. So you may have heard of a term, evaluation, because you wanted your child to get test accommodations for the SAT or ACTs, and maybe prior to then you hadn't sought out special education resources for your child. So the College Board, which gives the PSAT, the SAT, and AP exams, or advanced placement exams, require documentation of a learning or attention issue. And the ACT has its own set of documentation guidelines. So if your child has not had an evaluation, they'll need one if you're hoping to get accommodations on those tests, on standardized testing for them. Okay, so I'll be going much deeper into the evaluation process throughout this chunk of the workshop series. And so just keep on clicking. I'll talk to you soon.